Welcome to the pre-event of Unternehmertum's International Entrepreneurs Night, which at the same time is an MGIS input session. I'm Marisa from Unternehmertum, and I want to welcome all our MGIS startup teams, our speakers of course, and everybody else that has tuned in for this MGIS input session. If you're not part of the MGIS, you're probably wondering, what is this all about? MGIS stands for Munich Global Impact Sprint and was initiated by the three leading universities in Munich, the TUM, the LMU, and the HM, and their respective entrepreneurship centers, including Unternehmertum. And together, we support international talents and startup teams to found their impact businesses in Munich and to connect them to the local innovation ecosystem. We are streaming live to you today from the heart of Munich, from the newly opened Center for Innovation and Smart City Solutions, the Munich Urban Collab. And yeah, let's have a look at the agenda for this pre-event. As you can see here, we're going to start with a short input talk. Our topic today is funding, so how to get your startup funded in Germany. We want to give you an overview of the German investment landscape. Afterwards, we're going to have a panel on different funding opportunities and how to land them. We want to get to introduce to you representatives from the investor network in Munich. And afterwards, our MGIS teams have the possibility to ask questions to our investors, experts, and panelists that are here today. We're having a hybrid event at the Munich Urban Collab, which means that some of our speakers are with me here, and others are tuning in remotely from their office. All right, but that's enough for the introduction. I will hand over to our first speaker for the pre-event, to Mauricio Fleischer-Acuña. He is from Unternehmertum's Initiative for Industrial Innovators. Please join me on stage, Mauricio.
Thanks, Marisa. Welcome. Welcome live from the Munich Urban Collab. This place has recently been built to attract and support talented, motivated, and ambitious people just like you. The world needs more people like you, people who want to change the world through innovation. Hi, I'm Mauricio, and I want to give you a short overview about the German financing landscape today. But before we start, let me tell you this. Germany, the fourth largest economy in the world, has been built on the shoulders of innovators and entrepreneurs like Carl Benz, on the shoulders of inventors like Robert Bosch or Carl von Linde. These founders set the cornerstone for today's industry. And while this is great, we have to acknowledge that this happened decades, even centuries ago. And if we agree that we want to remain a country of innovation, of exports, and a country with a strong industry, we cannot do anything else than constantly, on an ongoing basis, try to earn those achievements again. And that's why we need new founders that create companies like Celonis. Three founders from the Technical University of Munich that scaled their idea of scanning IT log data into an $11 billion business. We need more stories like Flix Mobility, a unique combination of tech, e-commerce, and a transportation startup. Founded in 2013, they serve 400,000 connections per day. They are active in 2,500 destinations in 36 countries. Now, did you notice something? All of these founders that I just presented to you are all male. So we also need more female founders. We need more companies that have scalable solutions to contribute to the social good. We need more companies like Inveox, who are digitalizing and automating laboratories to increase the safety and reliability of cancer diagnosis. Now, you may ask yourself, okay, well, We like support, we like success stories, and we appreciate warm words. But there's one key ingredient that's really necessary to prove your concept, to develop a prototype, or to ramp up operations. In short, to get through the valley of death. And that's funding. So how can I get my startup funded in Germany? Well, the good news is, besides crowdfunding, crowdlending, family, friends, and fools, there are 3 major pillars you can go for in Germany. First, governmental startup programs. Second, grants and prize money. And third, venture capital. Now, I want to give you now, present you some examples of each of those categories. But bear in mind, these are just some examples, and there are many more out there. So let's jump right into it. If you are a startup that provides any kind of technological innovation, you may want to opt for Exist. That's really for startups that originate from academia, and you can get up to 125,000 euros here. You have to apply, and it's going to be a lot of forms, but that's okay. Now, if that doesn't work, in any case, you can still apply for Flügge if you're a Bavarian startup. It's very similar. Also, your funding team has to be less than 4 people, but there's still 70,000 euros you can get in funding. Now, as a German-based startup, you can also apply for Horizon Europe 2021, and there, if you convince them, you can get up to 2.5 million euros. Now, what about if you're more early in your journey? So, what about prototypes? Many startups face the challenge that they have to develop a prototype, but they don't have the means to do so. So, in fact, the Initiative for Industrial Innovators provides help to close this gap. You can apply through our website and get up to 10,000 euros to finance some hardware components you really need. Now, there's also the possibility to engage in competitions, right? They're all tailored to all different kinds of startups, so bear in mind, check if you're eligible. If you're a female founder, go for the Darboven Ideeförderpreis. It's women only, and there's the chance to win 65,000 euros. Now, if you're a startup in the field of chemistry, life sciences, you can just hand in your business plan to the Science for Life Award and wait if you get the 85,000 euros, sorry. Now, there's a third route you can take. Here the ticket sizes increase. Venture capital, it really depends on which stage you're currently at. So if you're early stage, you still want to get some more pilot customers, you're waiting for a higher valuation in a further equity round, then you can apply for the Initiative for Industrial Innovators Pre-Seed Capital Program, where we provide you a convertible loan with an initial ticket size of 100,000 euros, who can fund you as well in subsequent financing rounds up to 1 million. You may want to choose the High-Tech Gründerfonds if you are a startup that's in the space of digital, industrial tech, chemistry, life sciences. High-Tech Gründerfonds is one of the most active VCs in Germany and can help you with up to 3 million euros. Now, usually you apply, you go through a DD, you talk to them, it takes a month, but if you're lucky, you get also support in terms of network and operations. Now, if you're a startup that's focusing on industrial tech, mobility, and enterprise software, you may choose to go for a later stage VC, such as Unternehmertum Venture Capital Partners. They can provide you with initial ticket sizes from 500,000 to 5 million euros and up to 15 million. Now, as I just mentioned, these are just some examples, and there are many more out there. If you want to check out some useful resources, databases, where there's tons of different prizes, competitions, venture capital, landscapes, take out your phone, scan those QR codes. By the way, there's no affiliation between me or Unternehmertum, so that's totally fine. And check these out. I will leave them up for a bit. Now, with that, I want to close by giving you, the aspiring entrepreneurs, a big shout out. So the world really needs, bear this in mind, the world needs more people like you. So don't let obstacles on your road to success bring you down. because you can do it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Great last words. You can do it. Please take that message home. Thank you so much, Mauricio. You can stay with me on stage as you are joining our panel. Please have a seat.
Thanks.
And now we're going to see how this hybrid event is working. Let's see who is joining remotely for our panel now. Hello. I can't hear her yet.
Hello, Melissa.
Now that sounds perfect. Great. So for our panel joining tonight, we have Mauricio, as you already gotten to know now, and we are having Andreas Heubel. He is the Senior Investment Manager at BMWi. We have Cornelia Kolb, that you just saw. She is the Director of the Investment Network at ByStartup. And as well, joining is Alex Kiltz from Unternehmertum Venture Capital Partners. Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for stepping in for Oliver. You saw, our audience saw before on the agenda that Oliver, the investment manager from UVC, is joining. He's unfortunately not feeling so well. So thank you so much, Alex, for stepping in today. You're tuning in from your office in Berlin. So yeah, welcome everybody. And yes, of course, welcome again all our MGIS teams. And usually startups pitch in front of our investors, but today we wanted to do it a little bit differently. So I want to give our panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves to our MGIS teams and everybody else that is watching tonight. And for that, I will ask all of you to shortly introduce yourself to our audience. Just quickly say which organization or firm do you represent today, what role do you have in your firm, and what kind of startups do you invest in. And just because Mauricio is already here, we're going to start with him, and then we'll switch to the remote setting.
Sure. Let's just start. I really joined Unternehmertum 11 months ago, and I was just amazed by all the programs that Unternehmertum and the Munich entrepreneur ecosystem bring to you. And in fact, there's an early stage financing initiative supporting all the founders and startups that engage in this ecosystem, and it's called Initiative for Industrial Innovators. I'm working there. I'm part of the investment team, and what I do is really I talk to tons of startups every day. I really enjoy that, and I try to coach them a bit and try to see if there's a fit between the initiative and their funding timeline.
Amazing. Andreas, do you want to go next?
Sure. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be in your panel. So my name is Andreas Heubel. I'm with the venture capital team of BMWi. BMWi is a German abbreviation. The BI stands for Bavaria, and the BG stands for the German translation of investment company. And that also describes our mission. So we are the Bavarian investment company as a regional investor focusing on Bavaria, and we want to invest in the best startups that are active in Bavaria. And BMWi has a track record of almost 50 years. So we are also kind of a dinosaur in the local investment community.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us today. Next up, Cornelia. Do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, hello, welcome. I'm also very happy to be part of this great panel. Thanks for having me. I'm Cornelia Kolb, Director of the Investment Network at ByStartup. ByStartup is a Bavarian-based company acting as a neutral connector between startups and investors. And in our network, we have almost 300 private investors, which are business angel or family offices, as well as contact to almost 150 institutional funds that are investing in startups in very early phases, in pre-seed, seed, and Series A phases. We work with almost 500 startups a year. of whom we present 150 to our investor network and get financed around 50 to 60 each year. So By Startup is active for in this, let's say, format for 6 years now and has supported almost 300 million euros in investing. So I think what is unique about By Startup is that it's really a neutral investment. So if you're a startup and you want to get to know what does private equity mean, or what does it mean to have an investor on board, it's like a good address to come to a place and get some advice on how do I prepare around, what are investors looking at, how much money should I ask for, what are the rules in the market. So that's more or less for our first round. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, Alex, welcome, and please introduce Unternehmertum Venture Capital Partners.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. About UVC Partners, so we are around for a decade in the market. I'm investing out of a 200 million euro fund right now. We focus on startups all across Europe by now, actually, and have a dedicated focus on B2B startups. So in the B2B space, we focus on 3 core areas. That's enterprise software or SaaS. That's industrial technologies, meaning Industry 4.0, and adjacent technologies, and the area of mobility. We do invest in software and in hardware companies, and tend to do so in the early stages, meaning all the way between pre-seed to early Series B. We like to be the lead investor in those financing rounds, and we typically invest between 500,000 to 5 million and are able to deploy other significant follow-on funding rounds over several later financing rounds then. Yeah, that's about the fund, I guess. I'm a principal with UVC. I'm heading our Berlin office, and by now we have offices in Berlin and Munich.
Fantastic. That's already some great numbers. Thank you for joining. All right, now I'll go into a little one-on-one conversation with each of you. To our MGIS teams that are participating in this call, please note down your questions that you have for our experts. At around 1:45, you have the possibility to ask your questions. So just be prepared. Just give us a sign during the Zoom call. Either raise your hand if you have that function, or give a thumbs up so that our team behind the scenes knows that you have a question. And then we will switch you into the live stream, and then you will be visible and I can hear you, and you can address the expert that you would like to ask your question to. All right, and let's start again with you, Mauricio. We want to know a little bit more about the Initiative for Industrial Innovators. You've already told us a little bit about it in your introduction, but maybe to go back a little bit to the basics, what does the Initiative for Industrial Innovators fund?
Right, so we really have some focus areas in terms of segmentation. We do B2B startups, we do any kind of tech, can be industrial tech, can be deep tech, and it should have somehow the potential to be applied in industry. That's really the focus we have. We're kind of sector agnostic, so that's not really important for us. However, we really focus on Munich-based startups, just because we found that this ecosystem has so many great success stories and so many great founders that we want to focus our efforts in this area.
Yeah, I read that on your homepage. You're writing, we invest in teams originating from our Munich ecosystem. So now we have a lot of international startups watching as well. What does it take to become an Unternehmertum startup? Do you have to be part of one program? At what point are they eligible for funding of the initiative?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, we also get a lot. So Unternehmertum has a variety of different programs, right? So you can do from incubation until further acceleration programs until approach VCs in here. So it really doesn't matter on which program you participated. Is it an initiative? Is it really an accelerator program? Is it just a boot camp? There are also 1-week boot camps you can do. So it doesn't really matter. But what really matters is that there is at least some touch point to any kind of program or any key person in the ecosystem here. Also because we like to be in contact with the founders, and it's always easier if they're around.
So you would like to get to know the teams behind the idea.
Yeah, definitely. It's really important.
What could you say, like how much time does it take to get to know a team before you decide to invest?
Well, it really depends. I mean, usually it takes around 3 to 4 to 5 months, but it really depends how often you see each other, right? You can do a very intense, you can really have intense time and meeting every week, and then probably you will get to a conclusion much faster. But it's always good, and I really like to tell this founders that they approach investors early on, because then you don't have the pressure to really close anything anytime soon, but you can get in contact and you can get familiar with each other, and that really helps a lot.
And you already mentioned, I mean, you're associated with the Unternehmertum, so obviously you have a technology focus, but is there specific sectors that the initiative is particularly strong in?
Well, in fact, we do a variety of things. We do medtech, we do robotics, we do AI, we do farm tech, you name it. The thing is that we really want to tackle or help founders when it comes to achieve a higher valuation at an equity round. So that's something we can help you with when it comes to establishing contacts or just to use our network to get more pilot customers, whatever it needs really to help you achieve the next stage.
And so many of the teams watching right now are still in the prototyping stage. Most of them haven't been incorporated yet. And is it true that the initiative is handing out prototyping grants?
Yes, in fact, it's true. Prototyping grants are really important because we found that tech-heavy founding teams have really sometimes, they struggle just to build their prototypes just because they don't have their means for it, right? So here the initiative comes into play. You can apply at our website for the prototyping grants. You just send in your pitch deck and fill out some forms. Oh, no, just one form actually. And then we receive your application and we just check if we want to support you or not. And usually we really want to try to support as many startups as possible. So it's true. These prototyping grants are organized in batches. And we had one batch this year already. So we're planning to open the new batch at the end of this year. However, if you follow us on LinkedIn, you will always get notified when it opens.
Oh, that's a good tip. Great. And yeah, who qualifies for your pre-seed capital if we're switching to that?
Pre-seed capital really is, like we like to be the early or the first investor really. So you can approach us as one of the first investors. We also co-invest with business angels. What does qualify? Well, you should have any kind of hardware or combined hardware-software product. Doesn't mean we don't like software, but it's just sometimes in terms of IP, it's more easy to protect it. And that means that you can reach out to us if you have first interests of potential customers, if you've shown any kind of traction, but it can be really also at the idea stage, and we then can just start talking to each other.
All right, and then my final question to you is, how can a startup land one of your fundings? I mean, you already mentioned, you go on the webpage, you just fill out one form. Is it really that easy?
Well, actually, you have to reserve some time slots for us because we want to talk to you, as mentioned, and then we just do the usual stuff, right? We don't ask you any kind of weird questions. It's more, it boils down to the founding team, to the skill set, to your technology, a bit also if you thought about the business case behind your idea, and then it really proceeds into your next steps and the vision you have. And I think if you can make a sound story out of that, we really like talking to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mauricio. We'll get back to you afterwards. And yeah, I'd like to switch to you, Alex, and UVC Partners. You already introduced yourself a little bit. I would like to know a little bit more about the technology focus that the fund has and how big are the ticket sizes that you give out.
Yeah, sure. Happy to elaborate on that. So as I mentioned, we as UVC partners, we focus exclusively on the B2B side of the investment. In the B2B space, we are fairly agnostic in a sense that we look at a lot of different technologies, a lot of different business models in the B2B space, but feel pretty comfortable in specific areas, and those are the ones I mentioned. So that's enterprise software or SaaS, so software as a service. That is industrial technologies, or in another word for that, Industry 4.0, and the area of mobility. So those are the areas where we've made the most investments in. That's where we have a lot of expertise, also networks to corporates where we can provide introductions to. But we look also at other areas in the space, for example, more, let's say, sustainability-focused startups that not necessarily fit in one of the buckets because they're focusing maybe on new materials, just to mention one example. I would say the one area we don't focus on in the B2B space would be anything related to deep medtech or biotech investments. That's not our core expertise, and we leave those kind of startups for other funds to invest in. And you mentioned you asked for the ticket sizes basically. So we do invest at the early stages, pre-seed to early Series B. And out of the current fund, our usual check sizes are anywhere between $500,000 to $5 million as the initial ticket.
All right, thank you so much. And now, as Mauricio also mentioned, the connection to a founding team is very important. And I always feel, being part of Unternehmertum myself, that UVC and investment there is sort of like the golden stage at Unternehmertum. If you reach that stage, you're really one of our success cases. So I would really like to know, what do you look for in a founding team? Like, what makes a team qualify for one of your investments?
Yeah, that's a great question. If I would just know the playbook, if it would be that easy, right? I mean, assessing founding teams, I think, is one of the hardest parts of our job, right? Because obviously, most founders are very driven. You know, they're entrepreneurial. They want to move things, and they're smart, right? Those are the table stakes. But you gotta look a little bit deeper there. And what I'm specifically focused on when working with a team is an exceptional drive to learn, an eagerness to learn new things, to constantly develop, to be self-reflective about any part of the business really, and to show a strong ability to synthesize and to filter information. I really like that when I experience that in conversations with the founders. And maybe to mention two other aspects, two other traits, so to say, I look for in founding teams is an ability to switch between a bird's view level, so meaning very high level abstract thinking, and very detailed orient thinking and focus. And I think it's combining a little bit of the visionary aspect with the aspect of being a great executor, driving the business forward. And the last trait I would like to mention is being a great storyteller, right? I mean, founders always need to convince investors, hires, talent to join the company, to join the startup, and also customers to buy the product, or partners to partner with the startup. And I think it just helps tremendously if founders able to tell the story and to be really good at it. And yeah, I know that's a lot to ask for, but in the end, obviously, we're looking for exceptional founders, and yeah, that's what we're looking for.
All right. And if you can't invest yourself in one of the startups, as most of our viewers are international startups watching, do you direct them also to other VCs that could be interesting for them?
Yeah, great question. So as we invest all across Europe, we have I would say, rather broad international investment focus in the sense, and legally we could also invest outside of Europe, but we are really focused on Europe. But there are cases when we think it might be too early because there are a few key aspects of the business not proven yet, and we would like to see them, but we really like other aspects of the business. Then, for example, we provide the founders with introductions to funds where we see they're a little bit earlier stage than us, and they could be a great partner for this first initial investment. and just try to help the founders build the rapport with even earlier stage investors than us. For example, like purely pre-seed focused funds. So we do that indeed on occasions where we have a pretty good impression of the team and think we can help them in that regard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And one last topic that I would like to address, especially with you in our panel, is the topic of making sustainability a startup's business case. As many of the MGIS teams, as the name already says, Munich Global Impact Sprint, the teams want to make an impact, and sustainability is at the core of their business idea. And where does UVC stand on that? Lately, you've been named a few times with a sustainability playbook. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more on that. What is that about? And yeah, how can you make sustainability your business case?
Yeah, sure. I think it's increasingly a topic of greater relevance, right? And we as UVC partners, since 2019, we are assessing an impact score when looking at startups as part of our due diligence. And it's an assessment where we try to understand the specific sustainability-related risks and opportunities each startup has, and we try to score them. And then in the end, we have, let's say, a final impact score, and the score needs to be either neutral or positive in order for us to invest. If the outcome is a negative score on that regard, we wouldn't invest in the company. And we implemented this approach as a core building block of our due diligence, among other things like looking at the market, competition, legal, and financial due diligence. So we implemented it in that regard, and think it's a very important part of our investment decisions that our portfolio companies have at least a somewhat positive impact on the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And my final question to you, the same one that I already posed to Mauricio: how can a startup land a funding at UVC? Do you upload your pitch deck? Do they get in touch with you directly? How does it work?
Yeah, sure. I think in general we are pretty accessible. All right, for our website, uvcpartners.com, you'll find all our email addresses on the website. You find a form where you can upload your pitch deck. You can shoot me an email right away if you want to talk. Yeah, just reach out and we will continue the conversation from there. And also in regards to the sustainability playbook, I think it's quite interesting probably for you to have a look at. So I will share the link here in the chat, and you guys can check it out later on.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thanks.
And switching to you, Andreas. Tell us a bit about BMWi. What do you offer startups?
Yeah, so first of all, of course, we are an institutional financial investor similar to UVC and offer capital. BMWi has no sector focus, so we really look at more or less anything that could be interesting, and that covers really the whole range from IT, deep tech topics to life sciences. Our limitation is we have a regional focus on Bavaria, so we need a certain link to Bavaria. With regards to the company phase, we kind of start at late seed, pre-Series A, and we go up to Series B. What we need are first customers' first revenues. The area we exclude is really early seed investments at a stage when a company has no single customer yet. And so what we are looking for are scalable business models, convincing teams, and first revenues. Other than that, there's no limitation on the area. And besides the capital, with our history of 50 years that we've been in the market, we have built up a very strong network. So we, of course, offer access to other startups and mid-sized companies in Bavaria. We know most of the relevant investors, VCs, business angels, family offices. Our shareholders are more or less also major players in the German banking industry. So we have excellent access to the banking industry, also to the public sector. So when you get a BMWi investment, you also get access to our whole network, and we bring our experience and all our learnings from all the former investments, and over 50 years we have done a lot of mistakes where we have learned a lot. So yeah, we hope we can avoid those companies we are supporting. And with international teams, we are deeply rooted in the Bavarian and German ecosystem. So of course, we also guide you through the local peculiarities.
That's great. That would have been my second question for you, because you already mentioned in your introduction you're supporting or you're investing in Bavarian startups. I mean, it's already in the name of your firm. At what point is a startup Bavarian? Do they simply have to register in Bavaria, or at what point can you invest?
So we don't need a registered office in Bavaria. Business or the company headquarters can be outside of Bavaria. What we usually want to see is a significant office, for example, a sales office or R&D office with a few employees in Bavaria. And so there's no clear criteria, or there are no clear criteria that exclude an investment. But the less Bavarian a company is, the more picky we are. So yeah, but I would say a relevant office in Bavaria is kind of what we like to see.
Mm-hmm. And it feels a little bit like BMWi is more like of the more traditional investor in Germany. And would you say what makes the funding process for startups in Germany different from other countries? Do you have any experience on that?
Yes. So I think it heavily depends what countries you are comparing with. My experience is within Europe, there are more similarities than differences. Nevertheless, there are differences. And just as an example, and that might be interesting for the audience here, what we see in France, for example, that also very early stage investments, like even seed investments and more or less all of the Series A investments, the access to investors happens through agents. And that is totally untypical in Germany. And the more important point is, in those early stages, for most VCs, it even has a negative connotation if you approach them through an agent. And for example, that's really totally different when you compare France to Germany. And so the general mechanics in Europe, I think they are all the same, but there are those local differences. When you compare it to the US, I think the biggest difference is that the venture capital industry is much more established and the fund sizes are significantly bigger, and that leads to bigger funding rounds.
And the same last question to you. How does a startup land the funding at BMWi?
Yeah, so we also try to be as accessible as possible, and feel free to go on our website, take my email address or one of my colleagues, shoot us an email or meet us at one of the events. We are more or less at most of the events in Bavaria, and we are happy to talk to any startup company, even if the fit is not there yet. We try to get in contact as early as possible. And
what do the startups need? Do they have to have their pitch deck ready or the business plan, both ready? What should they send in the first email?
At least some company information where we can get a high-level feeling what kind of animal we are looking at. It doesn't have to be a detailed business plan. So a rough company presentation where we understand what the business model looks like, what the company stage could be, can already be sufficient for a first contact.
Fantastic.
So we are not really picky there.
All right. Thank you. Fantastic, Andreas.
Thanks.
And Cornelia, we are switching to you and to BMWi Startup. What services does BMWi Startup offer around startup investing? Because as I understand, you're not investing yourself, right? You have the network of many people who do.
Yes, yes. Well, by startup offers several services, starting with business planning competitions for very early startups that want to get feedback on their idea, on where they are heading, what their technology looks like, what might be obstacles in the market development. We do this totally out of cost for the startups. In addition, we offer them like an individual coaching, besides a lot of other workshops which they can attend. But there's like the core point around investor startup relations is that we offer them individual coaching. We get to know the startup and we want to understand where they are, what they need, and then we help prepare them the documents and if it is the right form of growth, like getting an investor, looking for an investor, we help them preparing the steps and all the documents and all the answers and questions that investors are looking at when they start talking to a startup.
Mm-hmm. And who can we find in the By Startup Investor Network?
Well, I said we have two networks. The first one is the private investor network, where we have a lot of, let's say, business angels that have funded a company themselves, that are very experienced, have good networks, and are very wealthy to invest. Because the investors, the private investors in our network, they also follow a portfolio strategy. Like, they are not looking for one startup that they really want to go on and only do this one, but they also look for a portfolio. So they are very sophisticated and very well networked in the, let's say, in the market. And besides that, we have, like, most of our private investors are from Germany, and Swiss and Austria. And then we also have a lot of institutional funds, as said in the beginning, but they are more European-wide. So we have contact to all, almost all institutional funds in Germany. We also have contact to the French VCs, also to Great Britain. But which is very important is that we have individual context. That means we know and we have talked and we talk in regularly distances with all of our investors in the network. So that means we are not sending an email or an introduction at an info@mail, but we know the person we are talking to, and we know what the fund is looking for. We know what the private investor is looking for. So I think that's a huge difference, so that it's really a direct contact.
Mm. And what do the startups need? I guess they also have to apply for this process, right? As to go into the coaching that you offer, and then finally to be matched with the perfect investor, so to say. What do they need to get into that process?
We also do not focus on any specific sector or industry. We are very open, B2C, B2B, hardware, software, but it has to have a very technology-based, innovative business model, or anything that is changing a market rapidly, so that you have a good chance of positioning yourself as a startup in the market. So that's what we are looking for. Is there really an innovation in the business model? Is there really something that we can scale? And to apply, it's very easy. So you can download a 2-pager on the website. You fill in as much as you know. It's not about making it perfect. It's just to give us a chance to get an impression on where you are and what you want to do next. And after that, we will get in contact with you, and at least if it's interesting and it is some match with our investor network, we will give you a first meeting where we get to know you and your team, or the startup in the team, and then we will see if we can go on. So that's all free of cost. And after this first meeting, it's probably we all have a good idea if it's worth to work together, let's say.
All right. Thank you so much, Cornelia. We are switching to the Q&A part of this session. Now, the MGIS teams, you are in the Zoom call, and you have the possibility to make a sign if you have a question, and then we will get you virtually on stage here. Do we have any questions? Just giving... I think I see someone on one of my screens here.
Yes, hello
Hi.
there. Thank you really much for the great inputs. So I have a question for Andreas, because, well, the BMWi is on our long list right now. Together, I know that you co-invest often with High-Tech Gründerfonds, and that's pretty cool. So you said in at one part that well, you need sales to be applicable for your investment. In our case, we have a field robotics startup, so it's deep hardware tech, and of course we know that it's difficult to have sales there. We came up with an idea. So we sold some of these robots, but in the future. So we made real contracts and went to farmers and just to prove that we have traction. Does that suffice, or do we need actual revenues?
So I would say in general, we want to see actual revenues, and the idea behind this is to follow a certain portfolio strategy. However, there are always exceptions to the rule, and we have invested in companies that had no revenues yet. So it really extremely depends on the business model, and it's hard without knowing more details about your business if it's possible, but I'm happy to have a look at it, and we rather look at one company more than less, and so yeah, we will definitively give it a try. Nevertheless, I think in 90% of our investments, we want to have, or we have first revenues and first customers we can talk to and ask them if the product, for example, is working.
Great,
Perfect.
thank you for
Thank you
that
really
first
much.
question. Do we have someone else who would like to raise a question? I think there is one in the chat. It's so far away. I definitely need glasses to read that one. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, perfect. The colleagues are zooming in. Someone has a question about the ticket size priority to everybody in the panel. Would you rather invest 2.5 million, which fits the long-term vision, or 500K for the first few years plan?
Right, I may want to start, and
Yeah,
then maybe
sure.
someone else can take over. So that's a good question, but I think you will have to decide yourself. On the one hand side, funding can be a full-time job, right? So you want really, you do not want a situation in which you secured some money, you run out of money, and then you have to go to investors again and approach them again and start the process all over again. On the other hand, it doesn't make sense to secure a lot of money right now, because usually that comes with a cost, right? You give away equity or any kind of other valuable things. So if you're early stage, you're not valued that high, so it doesn't really make sense to give away much at this point in time. So you have to find a balance between both. And I would say anything which would secure your runway of around about 1.5 years would be a good thing to do. So think about how much do you need for your next milestones in the next 1.5 years, and with this amount of money you have a rule of thumb of how much you should go for. Mm-hmm. But maybe, please others, correct me if I'm wrong or add your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I would totally agree with what you said, and I would add, that also the market sets you certain boundaries, and there's a correlation between what you realistically can raise, depending on the company phase and on your cap table structure. Because the problem is, if you raise too much money at a too low valuation very early, the founding team gets diluted too much and the cap table gets unhealthy, what makes it extremely difficult to raise follow-on rounds. So there are some there is a certain market logic that depends on the company phase and on the scalability of the business, and has influence on the right funding strategy.
All right. Thank you for these great answers, and thank you for the question. Do we have one last question? Anybody who's brave enough to join the call right now? Yes, we do. I can see someone. Hi.
Hi. My next question would be to Maurizio, because you mentioned that you have like a prototyping grant, and I feel that it might be important to some of our MGI teams. Maybe you can give some insights, what they should look for in an application, or how they should apply best to it.
Right, yeah, glad to do that. So when you apply for the grants, usually you just have to hand in a pitch deck. And in the pitch deck, it's important that you acknowledge all the different aspects that you would also acknowledge when you approach an investor, right? So just because it's only a grant doesn't mean that we are not interested in your long-term vision, in your go-to-market strategy, or in really what's your business model. So that's important. Just maybe one more thing about the prototyping grants. We really like to fund anything that helps you to prove your concept, but it has to be something that you engage with. So rather it can be hardware components, it can be material, it can be also any kind of other thing that helps you if you're a biotech startup, any enzymes or laboratory supply. But it cannot be, we cannot fund any kind of third-party services. So you cannot do your 3D rendering with a design company and use the grants for. But anything that's really needed to prove your concept, to develop a prototype, is very welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we would have time for one last question until we have to say goodbye. Yes, there is someone new on the line. Hi.
Thank you very much. Hi. Thank you so much for your insights. I want to ask more on the danger of co-creating. If you work together with manufacturers and you give them equity, when does it become dangerous that VCs don't want to invest anymore? Or is there a danger that VCs don't invest if you give them too much equity?
Who would like to go for it?
To get your question right, you mean if you have a strategic investment from a manufacturer?
If you ask more, if you work together with a manufacturer to develop your product, so you're able to accelerate much more quickly if you work with someone who knows already, like, say, some part of your product, and then you work together with them. I mean, one decision you can take is that you give them an exclusivity in manufacturing, or that you give them equity now. But I hear that giving equity, you might run into a risk that VCs don't want to fund.
I mean, there is always a conflict of interest to a certain extent between a strategic investor and a financial investor. And therefore, it's a tricky balance. So we have common investments with strategic investors, but there's definitely a risk connected with it due to that conflict of interest. And I would also say it really depends on the kind of strategic relationship, on the characteristics of the other party, and on the contractual structures, how you balance your governance. So I think there's no general answer, but I would agree you really have to carefully think it through before taking that step, because there are cases where we would not invest anymore due to that strategic equity stake.
Yeah, I would actually double click on that and what Andreas said. I think that's something we don't see in the market. I think it's one of the reasons where it's super uncommon to do that. We see strategic investment for other purposes, driven by other benefits the strategic investor would provide. But I would, in general, strongly advise against it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. We have actually come to the end of the pre-event. So I want to thank all of our experts, our investors. Thank you for joining today, either here on stage or from your office remotely. Thank you to our MGIS teams that have been joining and all the others. If anybody is interested to join the next Munich Global Impact Sprint, we're starting the scouting process in a few weeks. Just have a look on the 3 universities' homepages where you can apply. All right, and now it's 5 minutes before 6, so we have 5 minutes until the International Entrepreneurs Night. Everybody is very welcome to stay tuned, take a little break, get something to drink, and then we will see us back here in 5 minutes at 6 p.m. Thank you.